well, no. Tamika is the head of Project Liberty, which is the organization that Frank founded that is taking on God's work. In my mind, I'm a little biased because I said I wrote a book with Frank and we had planned to sit here and chat about it, but you are as deeply steeped in this as anybody, as well as in blockchain tech. You've been part of the GBBC all these years and everything. Why don't we just talk through why this is so important, right? We called it our biggest fight for a reason. Project Liberty is taking on that fight. The TikTok bid is part of that fight. Why does this matter?
Well, I'll start with just 30 seconds of context on Project Liberty. Project Liberty is an organization that's dedicated to giving people back control of their digital lives. And specifically, we're focused on building solutions that provide people with more choice in the way their data is used, more voice in the way platforms operate, and more of a stake in the economic value that they create online. We've been doing that for a while. We have built out a tech stack that's in use by 1.5 million people already. That tech stack would form the foundation of our bid for TikTok. And our goal, if we are successful, and at the moment we are the only bid that provides a pathway to a qualified divestiture, is that we will migrate the 170 million US users of TikTok onto that new stack and give them the opportunity to control their content, to control their relationships, to have interoperability with other platforms. So if we do a bad job, they can take their followers and their content and move it elsewhere. And ideally, as we do this, we will create the cornerstone of a new digital economy that is less focused on the attention-based models that are dominating the internet right now, and more focused on intention-based models that give people the opportunity to use their own free will and agency in identifying the types of experiences, content, goods, and services that they would like to interact with, and then allowing them to curate their own algorithms and feeds on that basis.
Okay, so since you ran with TikTok, let's stick there for the moment, right? So I think it's been interesting watching the phenomenon around that. Now, Jonathan Haidt, who's done a lot of work around social media's impact on children, has produced some data. It was discussed yesterday at the Future House, where Project Liberty is putting on some programming there, and it's interesting, like I think something like, I don't know, the amount of time, whatever it is, that on average, children is 4 hours, I think, is spending on social media. Of course, beyond that average, people are doing many more hours. And TikTok being a huge part of that. And then, that's this huge number of kids who are all out there, but then more than 50%, I think it was, or somewhere around that, saying they wish TikTok had never been invented.
I just got off stage with Jonathan, so we had a great panel on this. It's 47% of Gen Z wish that the technology had never been invented, which is a pretty staggering number if you're trying to be a good long-term custodian of the asset and preserve that value. And what that says to us is we need a different model. The models that are powering the internet right now are broken at a pretty deep level, and the time has come to change the way that our data is being used. The time has come to change the way that the monetization engines that drive these platforms are operating into something that hopefully is going to be a lot better for the people that actually use and create the vast preponderance of the value on these platforms.
Now, we will get to where this is all going relative to AI. It should be fairly straightforward to people that this is the precursor. I like to say that if we're going to take the Web 2 model and now put it into the AI age, we are taking all of that harm, all of that sort of very misaligned incentive and literally manipulative algorithms and putting it on steroids, right? That is really why this really matters. But let's stick with this a little bit because, it is a political exercise, whether we like it or not, right? Donald Trump has indicated that he may well reverse the Biden order on this.
And I want to double click on that for just a moment. The law that was passed by Congress last April is not going to be reversed. Mm-hmm. And that law is very, very clear. There are 3 requirements at least that you need to satisfy if you're going to have a qualified divestiture of the platform. You need to move it onto a clean tech stack. You need to not be an antitrust risk because you can't do this if you're a big tech platform that's just going to create further consolidation. And it's important to note that states' attorneys general in the United States have as much influence on that determination as the Department of Justice. And so this will, you can't just do something that's on the margins. A lot of people are going to have to get on board with this. And then under Chinese law, you have to be able to do this without the Chinese algorithm that currently powers TikTok because they've designated it as as a trade secret, and they will not allow for its export. You also need to be able to do all of that with a US-based capital stack. So there are very few entities that can meet the requirements of US law on this, and that I think is ultimately going to constrain the universe of potential outcomes to some extent.
Right, but he has talked about something. There's some talk about some sort of executive order that might, I don't know, stay it or
an executive order can't override a law.
That's true.
In the US.
But we'll see what happens. But it is interesting that I suppose where I was going with this is like those same, not the same kids, presumably the different kids, but nonetheless, the popular conversation around this, I feel like is really often quite misconstrued. It is focused on the threat from China, which of course is a legitimate threat. We, as I suppose the United States should be concerned about that. And it is, those who are opposing this ban are seeing this as some sort of like overreach for geopolitical reasons, and they're taking away this tool away from these kids. So we have seen pro-TikTok protests in Washington and so forth. How do we get the message? I mean, how do you get the message? What is the story that I think needs to get out? That this is really about, you know, the principle of the people's bid, that this is a different model, because it's really not just TikTok that's a problem, right? TikTok is just the one that we're all talking about because of that geopolitical aspect, but it's really the same problem across all the other platforms.
Yeah, and you know, two things to be clear. We want TikTok to stay lit. We think TikTok is a source of tremendous dynamism. It's a source of tremendous creativity, but it needs to operate on a set of principles and with a business model that is going to be good for the communities that serve it. I think it is important to note that the version of TikTok that is available in Europe and the United States is not the version of TikTok that is available in China. There's a totally different app. You cannot access the version of TikTok that is available in Europe and the United States in China. I would suggest there are probably some reasons for that. And we need a model for our technology that is going to be a better model, and that's what we are trying to build.
How do you retain the dynamism and you know, all the TikTok, the good of TikTok, if, you know, whatever we want to think of that to be, without that algorithm? Like, what is the mechanism by which you drive the creator economy, the dynamism, the viral, you know, if that's what you want to retain, and keep that user base engaged and interested in doing something constructive, what do you need to do that?
I think it was the great investor Charlie Munger who said, "Show me the incentives and I'll show you the outcomes." And right now the incentives for these platforms are wrong. The incentives for these platforms are constructed in a way that in far too many cases are designed to make the people who use them unhappy. And we're seeing a plethora of data right now and a plethora of new research on the mental health and the well-being implications of excessive use of these platforms. The answer in our mind is to abandon, and I alluded to this a moment ago, an attention-based model that's focused on making content as sticky as possible if you're being diplomatic, as addictive as possible if you're being a little bit more blunt, and then monetizing that addiction through advertising as best you're able. And instead moving from an attention-based model to an intention-based model, where people are able to spell out consciously what they want in their lives, the types of knowledge that they want to access, the types of entertainment and experiences that they want to have, the types of goods and services that they are looking to buy. And two things happen when you execute that shift from attention-based to intention-based. The first is that people have a much better experience. And we're seeing this now on a host of platforms. Pinterest is the first to move in this direction. You know, Bill Reddy, their CEO, who's great, and we've had a lot of engagement with Bill, came in 2 years ago and really leaned into this model. They have seen virtually every metric improve and improve pretty markedly when it comes to user satisfaction and user engagement. And the other thing that has happened, and this is important, is that the value of the platform has almost doubled. And the reason the value has almost doubled is because right now, TikTok and most other social media platforms are grounded in inference-based advertising. And inference-based advertising essentially tries to guess what's in your head. And it's actually not that valuable. It is valuable, but it's not nearly as valuable as you specifying what you are interested in. And intent-based advertising, it turns out, is a much, much more beneficial set of metrics for advertisers. And so if you can give advertisers access to that intent and give people the opportunity to spell out on a deliberate basis what it is that they want in their lives, again, you get a much better experience for people using these platforms, and you end up with much more value.
So I'm actually really pleased to hear that, because when Frank and I wrote the book, I was a little obsessed with the chapter that we referred to as the incentive, as the rewards chapter. Everything was about ours. It was rights, responsibilities, rewards, and rules to sort of redesign the internet and this sort of social media layer as it pertains to a more functioning society. And I was like, we really need to sort of like explore some of these market aspects of this. And it strikes me that quite often when you'll say to folks, hey, we would like to have the capacity to own your own data, to control that, to monetize it if we have to, or to extract value another way, you'll get this line back from Silicon Valley saying, you can't do that because your data's worth nothing unless it's aggregated, right? And I think it's a self-serving line because, of course, it is the existing paradigm around which you can make that case, but not under a paradigm where you don't have aggregation and the attention economy, as you put it, as the fundamental piece of that. But so we came up with some ideas, and they were specifically that, like literally the intent part of it, and we threw out some ideas about media companies sitting in the middle of essentially being a broker between somebody who is wanting to buy a car and indicating that they do. But I think where I want to go with this is a little bit, because we've got about maybe 5 minutes or so left, bring it back to AI, because you mentioned intention, and I was thinking about you, David. I'm thinking about the vision for which you have for agents on Morpheus. It is precisely that idea, right? That this is driven by intent. It's a very powerful idea. And we've had a lot of conversations today about owning your own data in the context of these big LLMs. And again, they are black boxes with the capacity to turn all of that information, built, by the way, right, scraped across not a lot of the really interesting sort of scientific data that's all behind a paywall or controlled by institution, or the business data that's all about really interesting processes, but all the messy social media data that's filled with all the biases and everything else that's there in the first place because of the misconstrued and misaligned incentives, the whole thing. So the LLMs are trained on some pretty shitty aspects of humanity that were there as a result of all of this. So how do we get to a world in which these agents that are going to act on our behalf are going to follow our intent, our permissions, and so forth? What's your message for taking this vision that you have for fixing the internet as we currently know it and taking it into that AI age?
Well, the first and most important thing is that this is a fixable problem. And I know there are many folks here today who have built technology that can help fix this problem. We at Project Liberty have developed a number of different platforms, including the decentralized infrastructure platform Frequency, to address these challenges. But this can be solved. This is engineering, and with good engineering, you can get around this. The second piece of this is that these solutions are available right now. This is not something that is going to exist in some theoretical future. This is something that we can access today, but only if we are willing to make the changes required. Tristan Harris from the Center for Humane Technology, who some of you know, was on this panel with John Haidt and me a moment ago. And Tristan likened the dynamics around AI to Jenga. And he said, we are building an AI Jenga challenge for ourselves as a species, because you can do incredible things with the tech. The tech is awesome. You can have many years of scientific breakthroughs delivered in a couple of weeks using these models. You can have tools like real-time translation, which will unlock access to knowledge for many, many people. But at the moment, every time we are putting one of those new blocks on top of the stack, we're pulling it from the bottom. And we're creating systemic vulnerabilities that have the potential, unfortunately, to bring down the whole structure if we are not careful. So our proposal is, let's move forward with an architecture that gives people agency over their data. Let's move forward with an architecture that gives us interoperability, so if someone is doing a bad job looking after our interests, we don't have to deal with that. We can go someplace else, and we can move our data someplace else. That's going to be foundationally important, and if we achieve that, the sky's the limit. And again, as we heard a moment ago from Lehman, I think the future is going to be really awesome, but that is the prerequisite for making
So
good use
the tech
of
is
AI.
doable, right? There's a policy debate that's going in different directions. How do we get the general public to understand, right? How do we get people to buy in, to participate in this, right? That seems to me one of the biggest challenges we have. Like I think one of the great lines that Frank uses is like, imagine a world in which, you no longer are having to click on the terms and conditions of whatever app or site you're using, but it's the exact opposite, right? The app is required to ask you for whatever your terms and conditions are for your data and so forth. That's a wonderful framing for those of us who understand these ideas of agency and liberty and what we care about as to how we build a functioning society on this. But we hear it a lot, right? People are, I don't care about my privacy. I don't care. I'll take this. This is much more convenient, right? What is the, with the minute that we have left, Tamika, what is the big, let's join the revolution message that you want the general public and really the kids to take off and run with?
This may not be the message for the general public, but I think it is the message for the folks in this room, because the folks in this room have a lot of context on these issues. 500 years ago today, my 17th great-grandfather, a guy named Hugh Broster, woke up in Cheshire. And when he went out his front door, he was in a society that was a feudal society. And all of his neighbors picked up their farming implements. They went into fields they did not own or control. They created valuable produce, and they sent it up to manor houses. And that was just the way it worked. And nobody questioned it. And everybody just assumed that's the way it would always work. Within Hugh's lifetime, that system changed. Within Hugh's lifetime, ideas of the Enlightenment and the Renaissance let people build a new future where they had rights, where they had ownership, and where we were ultimately able to be much more productive as a species because the model that we were basing things on was just fundamentally better. Right now, every morning, we take out the modern equivalent of farming implements, our phones. We go to work creating valuable data that we send up to digital manor houses. And everybody says we're stuck with the system, it's not going to change, this is just the way things have always been, the way things always will be. That's not true. We can fix this, and just as in Hugh's lifetime, that system changed within our lifetimes, and I hope in the near future, we're going to be able to shift this system onto a better
All right,
footing.
that's all we have the time for. I'm so glad you ended on that big sort of metaphor of feudalism. I think it's been a key message that we've run with. I will say one last line on this, and that is that at any given moment in history, the times at which there have been this explosive wealth creation, this explosive moment of innovation, have been when there has been a transfer of a new form of a property right to a wider class of people. Look at the Chinese government when Deng Xiaoping let every Chinese homeowner own their own home. That was the beginning of the Chinese boom period. It's the 16th century creation of the limited stock company in Holland. All these moments do this. Just imagine if we can actually take digital property rights and transfer that into the AI age in which we control it. What the possibilities are unfathomable. It is a huge opportunity. And I think that's the positive message I'd like to end, not just this conversation, but this wonderful 3-hour session that you all participate in. Thank you for sticking around for it. It's been a delight. Thank you to Sandra, to Diana from the GBBC. We will come back and do it again next year. So thanks for all your time.